Welcome to Welcome to Municipal Affairs. Canada's capital was the center of attention for local governments from across the country last month. More than 2,500 municipal leaders gathered in Ottawa for the annual Federation of Canadian Municipalities convention. Now, this convention is a landmark event that brings together communities of all sizes to share ideas, elevate concerns, and help shape the national conversation when it comes to municipal priorities. Now, the agenda was full and forward-thinking, touching on everything from bail reform and calls for stable, predictable federal funding to mental health and addiction and the growing concerns of misinformation in our ever-evolving digital age. Among those in attendance were delegations from Saskatchewan. Now, we sat down with Sarah McInnis, councillor from Humboldt, Saskatchewan, to discuss her very first convention and being part of the Federation of Canadian Municipalities table officers. Councillor McInnis, thank you so much for sitting down with me on the last day of the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. Now, I'm going to start with a weird question for you, but is this your first official convention at the Federation of Canadian Municipalities?
It sure is. My very first.
How's it feel?
It's exciting. So I currently sit on the board for FCM.
So you've sat on the board longer than you've been attending the convention?
Exactly. So it's a bit odd that I'm on the board, but it's my very first one, just timing of that by-election.
So how's it feel to be here, and what are you learning from the Federation of Canadian Municipalities that you didn't know about prior to getting being appointed to the board?
Yeah, so I always say, like after our provincial convention at SUMA, is I go into these sessions and I feel like the dumbest person in the room because you are learning so much. Subject matter experts, and then just from other municipalities and other elected officials. And, I'm new to this role. I'm newly elected, so it feels like, I kind of joke with our city manager, sometimes it feels like a fire hose of information to the face, except I've really found here at FCM and at SUMA, our provincial conference, that it's structured in a way that I'm able to learn just enough that I can retain it.
Really?
Yeah.
So what are you learning here that you haven't learned at SUMA or in your brief time as a municipal councillor?
Yeah.
Because you're truly drinking from the fire hose in this occasion, because most people who drink from the fire hose just get elected, but you drink from the fire hose by getting elected, getting appointed, and now you're running for re-election of the FCM board. How's it feel?
Yeah, so that's pretty par for the course for me. That just tends to be my personality. I jump right in, and I'm really glad that I have, because in terms of sitting on the FCM board as a newly elected councillor, I think for my community, it's actually really beneficial for our community-specific decisions for me to see the bigger picture and see how this relates federally and the impacts of federal decisions and provincial decisions. And so I've found it incredibly beneficial in my decision-making.
What specifically are you hearing? Because I was just chatting with the mayor of Whitehorse on the show, and he said sometimes you can feel like an island where you are. Like you don't know if other municipalities are dealing with the same issues. When you're having these off the hallway conversations with other municipal leaders, are they matching up with what's the issues in Humboldt, Saskatchewan, or do you feel like an island?
No, you know what? The issues do match up with what's happening in Humboldt. And I think I can relate to your former guest in the fact that it feels like we're an island, especially when we come to these big conferences until we get talking to people. And then it's like, whoa, okay, no, the issues that we're having in Humboldt is the same that the city of Ottawa is having, just different scales.
So what are the issues? What are the issues that you're matching up with on other municipal leaders?
Yeah, so a huge one is lack of funding, federally and provincially as well, but I'll focus federally. We need a new framework for compensation for municipalities. So, as we know in the municipal sector, what's happening is we are in charge of more than ever infrastructure, more decisions, more day-to-day, but we don't have the funding to match up to that. So definitely more funding. I think a lot of those issues at the end of the day come to we are trying to make big things work with small dollars.
So where do you go from here? Because you're going to be heading back to Saskatchewan probably today or tomorrow, depending on when you get on the flight. These are recording this on the 4th day, if I haven't mentioned that already. But what do you take back to Humboldt to ensure that the conversations, the networking, the advocacy work that you did here doesn't just end the moment you step on WestJet or Air Canada, not that they've sponsored me, but when you step on that plane, to ensure that when you get back to Humboldt, this continues on, because that's the hardest part about that, is the follow through, right?
Yeah, and I would agree. And so for me, I think hopefully if I'm reelected to my board seat, that certainly helps to ensure that I am always in it. And if not, I can still continue the advocacy work for Humboldt on that national scale with FCM. And so I think what it looks like is staying very engaged with FCM and the decisions we're making. Sometimes as a city councillor, it's easy to say, no, I'm just focusing on Humboldt. I don't need to pay attention to what FCM is doing. But the things that FCM is advocating for impacts us. So really just staying engaged and ensuring that our voice in Saskatchewan and Humboldt is heard on the national stage.
So this is your first convention. I'm going to be a little bit less political with you, but I'm going to have to be a little bit political, but not as much political.
All right.
Have you enjoyed it? Because there may be some people who listen to this and go, oh, that's just politicians going off to Ottawa and partying and doing what politicians do on the public dime. Looking at your time here, do you think it was worth it to be at the Federation of Canadian Municipalities and have Humboldt's voice on this federal stage?
100%. So I was talking to our mayor, Rob Mensch, earlier, and I said, when we went into the resolution, so we were voting on resolutions as delegates, the very first resolution, we had 3 people from Saskatchewan stand up. I think it's incredibly important to be here and have our voice heard. And I will say there has been absolutely no partying. I have my 1-year-old baby here with me. So after I'm all done learning and compiling my notes, I go to bed.
Councillor McInnis, always a pleasure to sit down and chat with you. I feel like this is going to be a start of a beautiful friendship.
Agreed.
From SUMA to now. Who knows what the future holds for our friendship. So thank you so much.
Agreed. Thank you.
We caught up with Gerald Aalbers, mayor of Lloydminster, Saskatchewan and Alberta, about his most recent conversation with newly appointed Energy Minister Tim Hodgson and how he sees working with this new federal government to advance local energy needs is a priority from a municipal perspective. Mayor Aalbers, thank you so much for chatting with us. You're here at the Federation of Canadian Municipalities Convention in Ottawa. What brings you to the convention this week?
Well, thanks, Chris, for the opportunity. Certainly the FCM conference gives us the opportunity to hear from the Prime Minister, as we heard yesterday. Certainly hear from the leader, the opposition today. We also connect with other municipal leaders from across Canada that share very similar challenges that we all share, but also see the opportunities that exist.
Now, one of the big things that is on a lot of people's minds during this convention is bail reform and also the new government. I want to start with the new government because you recently just had the pleasure of sitting down and chatting with the new Minister of Energy and Natural Resources, I believe his title is, yes. Tim Hodgson.
Yes.
Can you just explain how that happened and what were you hopeful to get out of that meeting?
Well, I had the opportunity, the SUMA office had reached out to me and said they had an opportunity to meet with the minister and asked if I was available. Being from Lloydminster and having a little tie to heavy oil, certainly in energy prompted the call from that perspective. I had really hoped to have the chance to express to the minister how important natural resources are, namely oil, gas, to our community as well as to so many other communities in Western Canada, as well as Canada, as an economic backbone to our country. It was certainly a great opportunity to have a chat. We spent 45 minutes and it was very open and very frank about a number of things regarding resources, as well as federal funding of programs such as ISIP. And I shared the story of about our $75 $81 million wastewater treatment plant, but how it was funded up to $75 million. The $25 million that the feds were contributed were very much appreciated, that's for sure, as I know many other municipal leaders would say that. But at the same token, 262 claims to get the $25 million back. Bureaucratic nightmare, red tape, and helped him to understand that. Because if they'd have shown up for the groundbreaking, or better yet, the ribbon cutting, which we saw no federal representation on either side, they'd have saw we spent the money. It wasn't wasted. We built what we promised, a state-of-the-art wastewater treatment plant to meet ECCC, the Environment Climate Change Group. And so trying to stress that to him, that there's still a lot of work to be done at the federal level to work with municipalities.
So this new federal minister of natural resources and energy has a different background than the previous one, Jonathan Wilkinson. When you were speaking to Minister Hodgson, did you get a sense that this is a new sort of era that we're in, or are we still in the same Liberal government as many people are expecting that we could be in?
Well, I came away impressed. He shared that he was on the financial team that helped raise the cash to build the Husky upgrader, which has been in Lloydminster for a number of years. He also shared he was on the Meg Energy team that helped finance that project. So that gave me a sense of feeling that he had some relationship to the industry, but he indicated he had never seen the project. So that gave me the opportunity to invite him out to come and visit in Lloydminster. He has definitely been doing asking a lot of questions and gathering information. He's brand new. He's a brand new MP. So he's been on Bay Street for some time. That's concerning, but at the same token, bringing a fresh set of eyes might just bring a change. And that, the jury is out from my perspective, as other municipal leaders and I have chatted regarding that. We're going to give them 6 months and see where the Prime Minister and his cabinet can deliver on some of the promises they've already made.
It's a simple question, but it's a big one. Do you feel like you were heard?
I believe I was heard. Now, like I say, the proof is always in the pudding on the actions. Because if the minister returns and we don't see him again, and we don't see more federal ministers out in Western Canada, the message didn't get through. And, just again, that sense that I got, I think that's why he made that trip out to Regina, on to Calgary, spoke to the Chamber of Commerce and the industry there. Decision makers are certainly centered in Calgary when it comes to oil and gas. So we'll see where it takes us. Like I say, it's going to be a wait and see for a little while.
So what's next now? What do you hope is next? Because you're going to give that 6 month grace period, the honeymoon period, as we like to call it.
Well, I won't actually give him that 6 months from the perspective that I will be attending some events at the Calgary Stampede, and I will be looking for federal ministers hopefully out and about. And if I can have those 2 minutes to 5 minutes to even longer, I'll take the advantage of it, because I think our message has to be continuously repeated. We have one Liberal representative from Saskatchewan at the federal level now, Buckley Belanger, and congratulating him on his victory. But in the same token, he's got a big piece of real estate to represent. He's very familiar with the Northern Affairs challenges that happen in our First Nations and Indigenous file. But I welcome him to come and visit Lloydminster so he can bring some of his federal counterparts out. And I would challenge the federal government that they need to have a cabinet meeting or a caucus meeting in Western Canada and not in Edmonton, Calgary, Jasper, Banff, or Saskatoon, Regina, anywhere else. Estevan, Weyburn, Swift Current, Lloydminster, even if they were to meet in Medicine Hat, I think the city of Medicine Hat would welcome that opportunity.
So we were here at the FCM conference, as I said at the beginning, and one of the things that we had was the Prime Minister, as you said. He spoke. Did you hear anything optimistic? Because when I was in that room, I got a sense that this is not the Trudeau government. This is a completely new government that we could be under, or a new Prime Minister that we're under, new leadership, and it seems like he wants to build fast. We talk about oil and gas. We talk about the pipelines. C-69 is a big concern, I'm assuming, for your community.
It is.
What do you hope to see from this new government?
Well, what I heard the Prime Minister talk about was housing yesterday was a huge step. And certainly, it doesn't matter if you're an urban, as the federal government determines it, and we just heard about rural, everybody under 100,000. I fall into that category as a rural.
How does it feel to be rural?
Oh, hey, we depend on agriculture just as much as we depend on oil and gas, and that oil and gas comes from our neighbors around us, comes into our city to be processed into asphalt and upgraded oil. So it's so important. He talked about housing. making sure that the housing programs that he talks about has the effect it has in Toronto, but also in Lloydminster, also in my neighboring communities that are smaller yet than we are, be it towns and villages. If they need 2 or 4 houses built, how do they access that program, and how do those resources make that way? So it's really important. But I think the important thing the Prime Minister needs to understand, in the federal government, the infrastructure to support the growth. Because we've went through a stagnant period of 10 years. I can tell you, we've had lots sitting in our city since 2014 waiting to be built on, and infrastructure's in the ground. So that's money we've had tied up from a developer as a municipality. But that is what I'm hearing from so many. We need an extra lift station. We need to tie in that master water, sewer, and stormwater drain pipes so we can get the developers going. So those are the things that the federal government needs to understand and get the boots and shovels in the ground so that we can go to work. Because we can't wait a year for the province to decide that they're going to approve a tri-funding party, and then 6 more months, we're already 2 years down the road. So I think that's where, if the Prime Minister and his team are prepared to do that, let's get serious, sit down, bring the representatives from FCM in the room and the provincial government, and let's talk about it and say, this is the action plan. We did it in the 30s. We did it during the Second World War. We can do it today, but it takes the initiative of government to remove the red tape at all levels. We heard about the reduction of red tape and supporting that. Well, let's do it. Here's the invitation, Prime Minister. We're here ready to meet with you today, tomorrow. We'll be back in Ottawa next week if that's what it takes, after you're done with the First Minister's meeting that, as you know, is going to be happening in Saskatoon on Monday. And it's really too bad, as Elizabeth May said, you weren't at the table one more time.
I'm going to pause there for a second. I just have one last question for you, and it's for a separate episode that we're doing. What does FCM mean to the city of Lloydminster, and what do you get from FCM that you wouldn't get by just advocating on your own?
FCM brings the voice of all municipalities that are members, including non-members. They represent that group at a national level. I can't be in Ottawa each and every day advocating for our community as much as I'd like to, in some ways, be here more often. There's a cost, and that cost is shared by FCM by having the total organization, working through our provincial organizations, representatives. And I'm very fortunate today. I'm still on the board of directors for FCM for SUMA, and I'll see where I stand tomorrow after the election. But I think it adds the value that our voice is heard. We were discussing it with one of my fellow delegates here at FCM from Alberta, and he said, if you're not at the kitchen table, you don't get a chance to enjoy the supper. You don't enjoy some of the spoils of your hard work. And I think that's the important message, as well as making sure our message gets fed back up. It is challenging when there's 2,000 different communities represented by FCM or so, but in the same token, we all share the same needs. Infrastructure, housing, dealing with crime, which we never got to, and dealing with the bail reform. There's so many things that we share that we're stronger together than we are standing on our own.
Okay, you brought it up, so I have to play in that sandbox for 2 seconds, because then I'll let you go, because I know there's another preliminary session going on here in about 2 seconds. Bail reform, rural crime is a massive topic at this month's FCM conference. How has the bail reform issue, and I say the lack of bail reform, affected the people of Lloydminster and surrounding area?
Well, it's affected a lot of people. I've got a little history. I served as a justice of the peace in the early 90s in Alberta, and it was used to be called reverse onus in the criminal code, where if you had an outstanding charge and you were brought before a justice of the peace again and you hadn't followed your things, it was then on the accused to prove why they should go free and not spend 3 clear days in cells waiting to appear before a judge. That's been removed. Today, the police forces, be it municipal or RCMP, don't have a leg to stand on when they come before a justice of the peace, a hearing officer, or whoever they are, saying this individual has a criminal record 2 arm length long, 12 failures to appear, and they've been charged and had issues with serious, that's been lost. And that is the problem. We have to have a scale of justice come back to protect the people, because that's what used to be put in front of myself as a justice of the peace. Individual rights versus the common good. And if your scale tipped, guess what? I'm afraid that was justice. It was judged by common man for common man, and we've lost that. And until the court system, the justice system, and the lawyers step back and let common men judge common men, we will not solve this problem, in my opinion.
Are you hopeful that it can be fixed?
I hope it can be. Nothing against lawyers. They have a specific job. But in the same token, when you're talking about the people on the street each and every day, I'd love to have that conversation with a lawyer that is on the other side, be it the defense, and having been a victim of crime. How do you feel? You ask a victim of crime, I'll tell you the scale of justice soon moves. And I think that's the problem. We see more victims of crime. And we heard that yesterday from the RC and Municipal Police Force during the police vision of what's wrong with this. They know the individuals. You can count them on one hand in some communities, but the system is broken and we need it fixed.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Gerald.
Thank you, Chris.
Now, with over 50 delegates in attendance from across the Prairie Province of Saskatchewan, we sat down with Randy Goulden, president of the Saskatchewan Urban Municipalities Association. She shared her thoughts on this year's event and the ongoing concerns around wildfires in northern Saskatchewan that were a top of mind for many in her delegation. President Goulden, thank you so much for sitting down with me and chatting. I've got to start with a simple question. You are here at the Federation of Canadian Municipalities on the last day. Why is it important for SUMA to be at a convention like this?
Well, it's phenomenal, the connections that we have, the work that we can talk about, looking at how SUMA can be involved in a national perspective. Because, as we know, Saskatchewan is not alone in this country. There are other provinces and territories, and we only are, as the theme says, stronger together if we all offer out a hand to help out whenever we can.
One of the big things that happens at these events and even at SUMA is that networking sessions where off the side of the hallway people are talking. Are you hearing the same conversations in your networking sessions of same challenges, concerns that municipalities in Saskatchewan are dealing with, that every municipality across Canada is dealing with? Or, as the mayor of Whitehorse told me, are you feeling like an island, that your issues are so unique that it's only Saskatchewan residents dealing with it?
Well, you always hear individual challenges that they're seeing, but I can put it almost in three large buckets, and that's infrastructure, it's revenue sharing, and it's public safety. So you can usually put them into those three big buckets that we're all advocating for. And absolutely they're individual things. I could bring some things from my community that might be, very individual. But when we sit down and talk, there's many things that are in common. What I find is perhaps some of the challenges are the different amount of zeros that would be included in the budget lines to deal with them.
You're the second person to tell me that today. There must be a common theme here. I want to turn to a little bit more of a serious conversation, if you don't mind, and particularly what's going on in northern Saskatchewan as we're talking. Wildfires are forcing the evacuation of communities. They're getting closer to communities. As president, your province is rallying around the people who are being evacuated. What does that tell you as a president of the municipal organization about the people of Saskatchewan?
Well, it just confirms what we already know. We're all good neighbors. Does not matter where we are in the province, and we all rally around for people that are in need, communities that are in need. And we've heard from so many, like, what can we do to help? We're a phone call away. And I know from SUMA's perspective, I've let everyone know if they need anything, just let us know. Let Jean-Marc know at our SUMA office, because we've all had issues in our communities, but these wildfires, they're taking people's away from their homes, their businesses. This is not going to be something that can be, helped and mediated over the very short term. This is going to be long term. So right now we are all offering help, but that doesn't come for just today. That's in the future.
There seems to be a lot of chat at this convention about the effects of wildfires. We saw what happened in Jasper last year. We're seeing what happens in Creighton, Saskatchewan, Flin Flon, Manitoba. Environmental concerns, climate change has got to be top of mind for a lot of people at this convention. Have you heard a lot of conversation around that?
I have, and I think one thing I want to say, what has been consistent in all of that is the support for these communities, but the leadership that we have seen from mayors and councillors and community staff. I hearken back to Jasper, a community that our family has been very joyful in for many years. We're skiers and we love the mountains been there, and I watched with my heart sinking with Mayor Ireland from Jasper and what he had to deal with. And now, we're dealing with the mayors in our own province having to deal with these things. And yes, we have to do something about that. And we really have to work hard on the mitigation. We have to work hard on making our communities safe and safer on things that we need to do, including the trees we're going to be planting. I mean, so many things have come to light in the last few years, and we can't sit back and say, well, this will never happen to Yorkton, Saskatchewan, because maybe we won't have the forest fires, but back in the early 2010, 2014, we have no river in Saskatchewan. We're not close to any large body of water, and we flooded out 4 years, first in 2010 and then in 4 years later in 2014. So we can't say that this may not happen. We have to mitigate for what might happen.
So going back to the Federation of Canadian Municipalities Convention for a few minutes, thank you for allowing me to divulge there for a second. How do you ensure that the work, the advocacy, the networking that you took away from this convention doesn't end the moment you step on that plane to head back to Saskatchewan?
Yeah.
Because the advocacy work can't stop the moment you get back to Saskatchewan. It needs to continue. What do you ensure you do?
Well, I think what I am very fortunate is I'm on the board of directors and on the executive committee currently, and I see this, but then I know our members see it, and sometimes you go, oh my gosh, it's another email from the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. What's this about? But it's an opportunity to contribute and be a part of. And I just hearken back to the advocacy done on behalf of municipalities for the federal election. The FCM Election Readiness Committee, even though the name says election readiness, they work all the time in between, getting our advocacy issues to our members, getting out the way to advocate, getting out the tools and the toolboxes that everybody needs, and making everyone prepared that it's just an email to their MPs or a letter to their local media, or help doing interviews like the ones you do, Chris. So it's just providing support to our hometowns and our RMs and our counties on how we can all advocate, because it's not just one voice that's going to make a change.
So what happens, and this is the question that's a little bit more political in nature, if you don't mind, because there might be some people who are watching this or listening to this going, oh, it's just a bunch of politicians getting together in Ottawa and doing what they do on public dime. What do you say to residents of Saskatchewan of why it's important for Saskatchewan to be at the Federation of Canadian Municipalities? What do you get from the FCM that you can't do by yourself?
Well, I think it's the support we get. It's the advocacy support we get, but the information we get. I sat in several different presentations around the Green Municipal Funds and got to see firsthand where we've gone with those funding, and it's gone into communities of all sizes, all over Saskatchewan, all over Canada, and in the territories. And that was evident here. They were able to meet the people that they can work with and get support and help with applying for those funds. So that's just one. But I think the other thing is it's talking to the councillors and mayors from across this country. And I've heard this many times. You come here and you've got challenges in your hometown about different things, budgeting, different, corrections and public safety. And then you come here and you talk with someone, and there may be some best practices shared, but it's also the awareness that you're not alone. You've got a phone call to make. You can call someone, and I know I've been accompanied here with our Mayor Aaron Keenley, and Councillor Dustin Breers, both first-time attendees, and they can't wait to get home and talk with our council and our administration about what they've learned and how they can put it to use. So I would suggest to anybody watching or hearing this, give them a call too and hear firsthand from first-timers.
And next year it's a little bit closer to home for you. You just have to drive a highway down to Edmonton. But President Goulden, I'm always appreciative of your time. Thank you so much for chatting with me. I feel like this is not the last conversation you and I will ever have, but thank you so much.
I can't wait to welcome you back to Yorkton, because it's always a pleasure having you there.
And finally, we close with one of the major highlights of the week: the acclamation of Vancouver City Councillor Rebecca Bligh as the new president of the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. We spoke with President Bligh on the final day of the convention to discuss her plans for the year ahead and how FCM continues to serve municipalities from coast to coast to coast. President Bligh, thank you so much for sitting down with me on the very last day of the Federation of Canadian Municipalities in beautiful downtown Ottawa, Ontario. First off, you've been here for the last 4 days. You've been crisscrossing for the last 10 months. How has this culminated into this weekend? How are you feeling?
Oh, it's been a wonderful weekend. As always, as you say, we visit people in their home communities, and then to have everybody together in one place here in beautiful Ottawa has just been wonderful to see. We've had a very lively few days with workshops and plenaries, study tours, all on the topics of municipal government. Of course, we started the first day with meeting with all the new ministers, or not all, but the particularly impactful ministers to municipal issues and priorities. And then, of course, the Prime Minister taking time to address our entire membership who was here. So that was wonderful.
I want to pick up on that just for a second, if you don't mind. You had the pleasure to sit down face to face with him on that stage, and all the delegates were hoping to hear something, and I think they did hear something about that renewed federal municipal relation, about having you guys as a strong partner. Are you optimistic about the future with what Prime Minister Carney has said on the stage?
Yes, I think that the Prime Minister brought a real sense of real talk and pragmatism. And so that's what we need, because that's what municipal leaders do. We don't speak high level and in the ether. We talk about on the ground and in the ground issues that are required to be city building and community building. And I think that the Prime Minister really got that, especially being here at our annual conference at a time when decisions and programs are being developed, budgets are being put together, to really see that municipalities came out in force through the vehicle of FCM to advocate for themselves and their own home communities. And so there was just, I think, a moment, a synergy in that moment where both they got to hear from the Prime Minister, but the Prime Minister got to really get a sense of what FCM's all about and how strong we are together.
A few of the key takeaways that I've noticed over the last 3 days of doing interviews with delegates is housing, infrastructural, bail reform, mental health, and addiction. Those are the key themes I'm hearing over and over again. As president, you've crisscrossed Canada. Are those the key topics that you're hearing that impact every single municipality, whether they are a major metropolitan like Vancouver or Toronto, or to the smallest community of Kyle, Saskatchewan?
Absolutely. Housing, affordable housing, which also helps tackle some of those other issues related to mental health addiction. Folks need stability. They need housing stability if they're going through treatment programs. Folks who are going through rehabilitation programs through a public safety lens also need stability in housing. So the fact that the federal government is finally back in the housing game in terms of below market units of housing, which we would call that in a Vancouver context where it's extremely unaffordable, on all measures related to housing affordability and availability. The fact that the federal government's back in the housing game to build affordable housing, I think, is music to our ears here at FCM. I've been with the organization for 8 years. I've been elected for 8 years. We have not seen enough housing being prioritized at the level that folks can afford. We're talking about the workers, we're talking about frontline responders, the teachers, the nurses, those that really hold up our communities. And so, I think that the housing piece and then the infrastructure that's needed to allow that housing to be built so that a toilet flushes, so that things work, and also infrastructure that is specific to rural. We announced our rural component yesterday. We're advocating for a specific rural infrastructure fund. And why that's important, and we really did get this through to the Prime Minister, I believe, is that we can have nation-building projects, but if once those trucks leave the ports with all those goods and products, if they can't get through our roads and our bridges without hitting a bottleneck, then we've missed a massive step in being able to build that national prosperity and economic development that's going to benefit all Canadians. So I think we've really hit the mark on some of those pieces where infrastructure links to economy, housing links to mental health and addictions, and that public safety, both on the RCMP staffing side, the funding side, also is going to impact that issue of repeat offenders and bail reform as well, by addressing sort of the chronic offenders while being able to actually support folks getting back into stability. So as you can hear, everything is connected that we do at the municipal level. Everything has a thread into something else, and that's what municipal leaders bring to the table when speaking to different orders of government, provincial and federal.
You talked about the rural report that was released with yourself and Neil Como, the chair of the Federation of Canadian Municipalities Rural Forum, if I'm doing that right. There seems to be a big push for rural topics at this year's convention. Why was that important? Because traditionally you wouldn't think Ottawa is the place to talk about rural communities, but it seems that at the Federation wanted to talk about rural communities this time. Why was that important for yourself and for the organization?
You know, I think there's always been a lens on rural, but perhaps not done in a way that really lifted up the voices of our rural members. We've always known it's important internally, but it's about what we project out as well. And a real focus at this time when economic development across the country is critical, and that can't just happen in our urban centers. We need to recognize that agricultural land, energy, moving goods and services, warehousing has to happen where we have a lot of land mass, and that happens in rural. Absolutely contributes to the national prosperity picture, that we recognize our country is at a pivotal time to meet that moment and build, as the Prime Minister says, build, baby, build, and we're all for that. But we can't do that if we don't invest in rural, because that is really where where the rubber hits the road in terms of resource communities. And they have smaller populations there in rural Canada, so we can't simply just rely on property tax to put that infrastructure in place that's needed to make sure that the services are where they need to be for communities, and that housing is there for workers as we grow our country in a sustainable way, which means all size communities right across coast to coast to coast.
I want to talk about the future a little bit, if you don't mind, before I let you go. And you are losing Scott Pierce, but gaining Mark Dorval. Doré. Sorry, I apologize. I just had him on.
He was so Mark Doré is the mayor of Dorval. So there we go.
I knew I'd get that right. Are you excited about the future with this new board? I know it's some similar faces, but you're adding Mark the mayor onto the board, or the table officers, I should say. Are you excited about what the future of FCM looks like under the new leadership of you as full president now? I'm not sure if you were interim or sort of president, but are you excited about the future, what happens next year? Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, Scott Pierce has been a force at FCM. We wish him very well. He's retiring from municipal politics after I don't know how many decades. We'll miss him, but I know he's happy. He's going to put up that gone fishing sign and really mean it this time. So we wish him well and thank him for his many years of service to FCM. And looking at the current table officer and also the expanded executive from that, I'm very optimistic. I'm very excited. We have a hardworking team. We work together in a very unified way. We're all different, so we bring different lived experience and qualities to the table as table officers. But I also know that I can call on any of my table officers now to show up in members' communities, to do what they can. We've got each other's backs. Some of them are dealing with real emergencies in their home communities this weekend in Manitoba. Kathy Valentino, our second VP officially now. So yes, and we welcome Mayor Mark Doré as third VP, and I know he'll represent Quebec very well, the Quebec caucus, and I look forward to getting to know him better and working through this year's very ambitious advocacy agenda as we continue to build on the relationships that we started here this week with the new Prime Minister and Cabinet.
What's the advice that you give to delegates as they begin to head home? Because there's the tendency when you go to a convention that, okay, you get home and everything that you learned is just going to sit on the shelf. How do you ensure that the advocacy work that happened here, the networking that happened here as president goes on to ensure that you're not starting fresh in Edmonton in 2026?
Think of those first, 3 folks that come to mind that you met at conference. text them, stay in touch with them, get on their social media, find ways to stay connected. Even if it's just a couple of the hundreds of people you've met, those relationships go far. They in my experience, are folks I continue to call on as a municipal leader. Learning from one another, that networking, as you say, is a critically important part. And this really is an opportunity for professional and personal development as local leaders. We're often tasked with so many different jobs. We are the jack of all trades when it comes to growing communities. And so having that sort of anchor to bounce ideas off of or just tell someone about your day is critically important, as well as continue to lean in to the FCM work, off cycle, if you will, between conferences. We have tremendous amount of tools to help smaller, larger communities make sure that they have the information they need, the data that they need to represent their communities well, and also to continue to push with their local MPs on what are some of those issues that we're carrying forward into the coming year. So I think at the end of the day, I know we're all busy, but SCM's here to support you. And any opportunity to lean in, put your hand up, let us know what you're up to and how we can connect with you and your community. That's what this next year is all about.
Final question, it's kind of a political one, but as president, you should be prepared for it. What is the benefit of a membership with the Federation of Canadian Municipalities that municipalities wouldn't get by just doing the advocacy work by themselves?
It's the theme of our conference this year. We're stronger together. And the reality is that we live in a massive country with very, very different challenges from coast to coast to coast. FCM is an incredible way for all of those different priorities and perspectives to be funneled into a united voice. And in that united voice, we have a much greater chance of connecting with the federal government on our advocacy priorities, the Housing Accelerator Fund, the Canada Community Building Fund, the Green Municipal Fund, and all the other funds and the things that we do, the Infrastructure Bank. We can advocate to CMHC. We're connecting with ministers. And what we know, and we saw that with the U.S. trade crisis this year, is that things are going to happen that we have not forecasted and planned for. So the benefit of being linked into FCM is the ability for FCM to be able to respond real time to an unanticipated urgency or crisis and already have that membership and that relationship with FCM so that you have that voice at that table when we are advocating and showing up and have that seat at the table as a very, very significant level of government in the big picture of all orders of government to be building this country for Canadians. So we're here for our members, and so we hope that members see that the value is there for them too.
President Bligh, always a pleasure to sit down and chat with you. I feel like this is the first of many conversations over the next year. Again,
yes.
Always a pleasure.
Thank you for being here, Chris.
Thank you so much for tuning in for another episode of Municipal Affairs. Now, we hope you've enjoyed today's episode of Municipal Affairs, which was only made possible by you, our generous supporters of the Cross Border Network. Your continued support and financial backing of this show makes episodes like today's possible. If you want to join the growing list of supporters, head over to the crossborderinterviews.ca website and support the show today. To stay in the loop with all of our latest episodes, don't forget to subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast platform or on YouTube, and follow us on social media. For even more content and to learn more about the stories and the people we feature on this show and our sister shows, visit us online at crossborderinterviews.ca. Again, your support means the world to us, so share this episode with your friends, your family, and help us keep the conversation going. Until next time, stay informed, stay engaged, and we'll be back with a brand new episode of Municipal Affairs soon. Till then.